It's the worst of the CBC for December 23rd, 2019, the show where I watch the CBC so you don't have to. All right, it looks like we're already on holiday news time coverage as we're on a weekday, but it's still a half an hour loop cycle. So, I mean, it's pretty classic CBC today. I mean, the top story is such a CBC story, a perfect mainstream media story to cover. Like, the Boeing CEO is fired, and they're replacing him, and like Boeing has connections to Canada, and airplanes go missing, and airplane crashes. It's a great thing. It's apolitical. It can be covered in 30 seconds, but you stretch it out to 7 minutes just so you can really talk about nothing and inform no one on nothing important. And the number two story is Khashoggi, right? A Muslim Brotherhood journalist gets killed by crazy Saudis, and the Saudis have a trial where they're going to execute 5 people. Who knows who these people are? It's probably just either secular bloggers or more Muslim Brotherhood people. It's the Saudis. No one really trusts them. So there's that. Which means, like, the worst covered story they did today is, of course, there's a Trump impeachment story. Are we going to talk about the fact that the Prime Minister admitted it to having intent in criminal wrongdoing in the SNC-Lavalin scandal? Nope. More impeachment talk. And the reason I'm going to talk about it is because what they are saying about the impeachment and the fight between the Democrats and the Republicans in the Senate is the reason why we're having this story is because there's so much misreporting to begin with. Like, there's 2 articles of impeachment. And the first one, we can talk about whether or not it's legitimate or what happened. The first one is essentially the call with Zelensky, and it's basically the accusation that he put political pressure on Ukraine for the quid pro quo. It's basically all that. The second thing is actually they're trying to get him with obstruction of justice for not testifying on behalf. But this is what they're covering now, sort of like who will testify in the Senate and can we do this? Like people responding to subpoenas. This needs to be properly covered because there are 2 things at play here. There's executive power and there's congressional power. So if the can Congress subpoena the executive branch, and can the executive branch subpoena the congressional branch? Who has the power to subpoena here? And the answer is when these 2 houses get into conflict because there's legitimate, national security evidence. Like this actually is the responsibility of the judiciary. So it's really the Supreme Court and the judicial system who would have to say, okay, is this subpoena can Congress subpoena President Trump? The judicial branch actually has to decide on that. There's a balance of power. Like the executive can't just overtake the congressional branch willy-nilly. Like they need the consent of the judicial branch, and congressional branch can't overtake the executive branch. They need the judicial. Like this is how the system works. And so to say, oh, Trump violated a subpoena by Congress, like no. And the obvious reason why you can't have the congressional branch just subpoena anyone in the White House and put them under oath is there's legitimate national security concerns when it comes to people of either the executive branch or the congressional branch. Like, we want access to all of Trump's phone calls with foreign leaders. Like, this is insane. Like, there's legitimate national security, economic security, nation things at risk when you do this. So you obviously can't have this. This is why you need, and in order to get the judicial branch to go ahead with it, they would need something called evidence of wrongdoing, which they haven't really put in force. So they'd actually need to do a real trial. They'd actually have to show countervailing points, whereas the House Democrats want just to have this sham, quick sort of impeachment vote to rah-rah the base. So the second article impeachment is literal trash. Literal trash. It makes no sense. It has no backing. And anyone who voted for it is blatantly being dishonest and doesn't care about the Constitution or anything. This is just a political show. Now, we can go on the first article, like the whole Ukraine thing, but like, is it obstruction of justice to not comply with the subpoena? Like, it sounds like this is my problem, is CBC in the news will cover because it sounds like violating a subpoena, but actually when you break it down, like, there needs to be a lot more said here to actually bring in the context because, can a Republican House just make the next Democratic president make Obama testify on everything he said to the Iranians or to the Yemenis or to the Russians? Like, no, you can't just do that. There are other powers at play. So that's just totally covered absolutely dishonestly, and it drives me crazy. I had to talk about impeachment again. So what's the biggest omission? I'll go with this. Okay. So Canada just voted against Israel at the UN, and it's Hanukkah. Hanukkah is the most Zionist holiday of all. It is the story of the Maccabees fighting off the Greeks and retaking the Temple, or the Temple Mount, which is in the old city of Jerusalem. And Canada just signed a North Korean-backed dictate. The UN just voted double down on it, saying the old city of Jerusalem is occupied territory. It has nothing to do with Judaism, and there's actually a complaint being made by the ICC and the UN, and the majority of countries actually support the claim that Jews living in the old city of Jerusalem, so where the Maccabees retook from the Greeks, is a war crime, a literal war crime. And the international community, a lot of people are voting for the fact that Judaism has nothing to do with Jerusalem. But I'm not going to actually focus on that. I'm going to ask the question instead. Does Jesus have anything to do with Christianity? And that might seem ridiculous, and the answer is obviously yes, but I'm asking that as a serious question. Does Jesus have anything to do with Christianity? And the reason I say this is because the same people making the claim that Jerusalem has nothing to do with Judaism are making the claim that Christmas and Jesus aren't actually Christian, they're Palestinian. So in Bethlehem, where Jesus was born, under Israeli control, pre-1993, it was around 90%, over 85, around like 89% Christian. Today, it's 22% Christian. And the Palestinian Authority now controls Bethlehem. This is a quasi-Islamist, tripartite terrorist state. They govern with Hamas and Islamic Jihad in them. And they're making the claim, actually, that Christmas in Bethlehem is not a Christian event, it's a Palestinian event. Now, it wasn't even called Palestine until 100 years after Jesus died, but this is the claim they're making. And they're making this claim, and what they'll do on Christmas this year, they'll have a tree in Bethlehem, and they'll use it as an Islamist rally, and they'll put a couple of Christians around the tree, the ones who are like the mayor and under PA control, and they'll say, oh, the Zionists are being very mean to the Christians. Like, it's not Muslims versus Jews, it's Zionists versus everyone. That's on December 25th. But from December 26th to December 24th, they're ethnically cleansing Christians out of there. So they're down to 22%. But most importantly is the PA is now actually making a move to buy up the land where the Church of the Nativity. So where Jesus was actually born, the PA is actually now making a move to say that the ground Jesus is born on is nothing to do with Christianity. It's actually a Palestinian heritage site, and it should be under control of an Islamic government. Okay, so this is sort of the danger to the rest of the world. So when crazy people say things like, oh, Judaism has nothing to do with Jerusalem, or Zionism and Judaism are two different things, Zionists aren't Jews. Okay, patently insane, but that logic doesn't stop there, and it grows. So from the same UN and globalist forces that brought you that Israel and Judaism have nothing to do with each other, well, you now get Jesus and the birth of Jesus has nothing to do with Christianity. It's really Palestinian. So where we're at today. So I'm going to push back on that narrative. I think Jesus is actually a really big part of Christianity. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that. So what does today's CBC get? They really cover nothing. I mean, I'll get 5 out of 10 Rosemary Bardens. It's only a half an hour. I've seen worse, and it could be a lot worse. We'll give it a 5 out of 10 on the Rosemary Barden scale. I will see you probably Thursday. So Merry Christmas to everyone.